Welcome into the Fast Lane. Trey Lyle here with you, joined by our covering the Commonwealth for an extended version talking Liberty Flames, Damien Sordelett, talking previewing LU season. This is number 2 of our local team's college preview. Obviously, we had Damon Dillman covering the Who's, and then later on we'll have David Cunningham from Tech Sideline covering the Virginia Tech Hokies. Dame, how are you doing, first of all? And is it weird that I'm asking you the questions instead of Ed?
No, it's not a little weird. You and I get to talk before, I hop on with Ed and, we have a nice little conversation going on each time. So not weird at all. And, honestly, I'm excited to, almost get into game week and kind of get back into that rhythm of, weekly press conferences and get ready for a game and hopefully not have the turmoil and the chaos that we had last year where you knew who was on the schedule, but you really weren't sure if they were going to be on the schedule. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to this year.
How does it feel? Obviously, you've been connected to this team for a while. This is one of the most anticipated seasons in the program's history. A lot of expectations around it, and we'll get into that as we talk about this team. But how does the sense of this team feel, or the excitement of the fan base as we head into, maybe one of the best seasons in program history?
Yeah, the fan base for sure is excited. That's, you hear a lot of the Liberty people talk about season ticket sales and you think, oh yeah, they're going to hype that up because, that's what they do. But, just based on the demand for tickets, I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, when our single game tickets going to come on sale because, they want to go to the Army game. They want to go to the Louisiana game later in the year. So there is interest and people are excited to see what the product's going to be on the field. From a team perspective, they're ready to get on the field because they want to prove that last year wasn't a fluke. But they also know that you look at what they did last year, you have a lot of the same people coming back, but you're losing some leaders from last year's team, namely Anthony Butler at linebacker, CJ Yarbrough at wide receiver. And, the DNA of the team is totally different. So, they've said the right things here in preseason camp. They said they have to earn where they're ranked right now, which is, fourth in the receiving votes in both the AP and the coaches poll. So, they're eager to get out there, get Campbell in the first game and hopefully shake off some cobwebs before you get into a pretty meaty schedule this year.
Yeah, definitely one of the best, schedules. It helps to be an independent. Obviously, Notre Dame kind of sets the bar for an independent schedule, but Liberty's got a really good one with a lot of intriguing matchups. And obviously, the most intriguing part of this team, starting with the offense, is the quarterback, Malik Willis. And I think time in and time out over the last 2 years, we've talked about how great his skill set is and the fact that he's going to be a dark horse Heisman candidate. He's going to be a first-round prospect. But the importance of him performing to those expectations and keeping Liberty in the national spotlight, I think, is an underrated importance for this team in terms of the larger success they want to have. How much of a key is Willis keeping Liberty nationally relevant throughout the season?
Yeah, the offense starts and stops with Willis. I mean, he's the guy that makes the engine run. He's the one where we're going to see this year if he has taken another step in his development in terms of play recognition, execution, and mental awareness. And those are key elements to his game that you could see there was steady building blocks last year as, the game started to slow down for him. And, he was able to read things a lot easier at the line of scrimmage and was able to make really decisive and accurate plays. But there's a lot left on the table. And so we need to see those steady improvements this year. Against Campbell in week 1, FCS team, you might be able to, showcase that because you're going against teams that don't have the skill level. So I'm really looking forward to week 2 against Troy, week 3 against Old Dominion to see where he stacks up. And if we see that improvement, then, Liberty's going to be in tune for a special season, because if he is able to begin taking those next steps forward, we're going to see, drastic improvement from this offense, which was one of the more explosive ones last year.
Do you think if he repeats, or even let's just say meet expectations in terms of improving from last season, he goes down as maybe the most impactful player in program history?
No doubt. I mean, you saw what Rashad Jennings did back in, the late 2000s but never got them to the playoffs. We saw what Buckshot did for 4 years, never got them to the playoffs, but, had a winning record with them. But with Malik Willis, it's something different because, Now Liberty's being ranked. Liberty's being recognized nationally. You have these national radio programs that probably would have never said anything about Liberty in the past, now saying, we can't wait to watch them play. And that's the impact of a guy like Malik Willis, who, for all these accolades that he's getting in the preseason, for everything that he can do on the field, he's one of the most humble kids I've ever interacted with. I mean, he defers all the praise to his teammates when they lose, when they win, and then takes all the blame when they lose. That's something that you don't get out of players these days. He's like that, the old high school football coach adage, players win games, coaches lose games. So he takes the mindset his teammates win games, and then when they lose, he puts all the blame on him because he will say he could have done something better. I think that's a trait that is why, when you look around the offense, he's a leader, Tom Sargent's a leader, and those are the first two guys that people go to on offense because they want to follow their direction and what they're doing and leading this program.
What would you say is the one thing he needs to improve on the most from last season, or something he struggled with? I know turnovers at some point has always been an issue, but that's you could say that about pretty much any quarterback in college football. What would be one thing you want to pinpoint that you would like to see? Obviously, you talked about week 2, week 3, throughout the season before you get into your bigger matchups like Syracuse, Ole Miss, and even Louisiana.
Yeah, it's going to be the pre-snap recognition. There are a lot of times last year when you go back and watch the film and you listen to what Hugh Freeze said, he said Willis missed a lot of gimme throws early that would have helped extend plays. Yeah, I saw those. That's where he missed. And then he had to force things into certain windows where that resulted in most of the interceptions. And then there's the instances where he doesn't take as deep of a drop as he should. So instead of taking the 8-yard drop, he's going back 5-6 yards, and the offensive line is protecting at the 8-yard boundary. And all of a sudden, these defensive linemen have ways to cut inside, and the offensive linemen are thinking, why are they cutting inside? Because Malik should be behind us, but instead he's in front of them, and they're able to get to him, which results in sacks and results in the ball coming loose. So those are a couple of things you need to see cleaned up. So if he can get those quick passes early, before the defense has a chance to, mature and getting to, where they need to be, that will help a lot because that will open up those big plays down the field. We saw last year the big step he took in between the Louisiana Monroe game and then the Southern Miss game was his deep passes and the ability to connect on those better. And I think, if he's able to get those quick throws early, make sure he gets the receivers when they're open and they're able to pick up 5, 6, maybe 10 yards, that opens up so much more downfield.
And obviously, having this premier top caliber, top 10 quarterback in the country, let's be frank about it, you need an all-star offensive line. And luckily, Liberty brings back all 5 starters. This is a team, that truly kind of went against the grain of Hugh Freeze in terms of they control the ball a lot with a rushing game, 250 yards per game, and they won the time of possession battle throughout the season on average, kind of a little different than what Hugh Freeze had at Ole Miss, where it's a little more up-tempo and run and gun kind of feel to it. How important is returning all 5 starters to the offensive line, and what do you see as the ceiling for this group?
Well, you look at the ceiling for this group, and they've already crashed through that ceiling. I mean, they've broken it because Tristan Schultz was recruited when Liberty was at FCS. Damien Bounds, Tom Sargent, all recruited when Liberty was still an FCS program. So you have 3 guys who are starting from the left tackle to center who have no business playing at this level, at this caliber on scholarship. I mean, they have essentially taken, what the level they should have been at and just went right above that because they are blocking like premier interior and edge pass rushers and giving Willis time. And that's something to the fact that, Tom Sargent started 47 consecutive games at center. I mean, the experience he's gained over time has allowed him to improve. Tristan Schultz over there on the left side, he started at right tackle at Liberty and then moved to the left side. And, he's been a stalwart there ever since Julio Lozano graduated. And then you look on the right side, Brendan Schiller and Cooper McCall were both recruited when Liberty finally moved to FBS, and you get to see them. They're 2 of the best linemen on this team. And, you could see last year when Liberty ran to the right side, those guys were clearing lanes because they have that edge. They have that tenacity, and they have, the speed and the size and the strength that you want out of FBS linemen, and they're able to produce. And last year was their first year starting, and you know what? They were exceptional there on the right side. So you couple that plus three guys who've been here 5-6 years now. I mean, that only helps for this line to have a type of cohesion that, they're in sync whenever they get on. All five steps are in line, all five are blocking in unison. And, that only helps, for Willis in the pocket, and then, running the ball with, either Willis or Joshua Mack, TJ Green or Shader Lewis.
You touched on the running backs there. I want to get to Joshua Mack. Obviously, led the team in rushing from a running back's point of view. Obviously, Malik Willis was, would carry the load, frankly, in a lot of games. Rushing, how important would it be for Mack to kind of take that load a little bit off Willis and behind this, senior offensive line? This guy got around 800 yards last year. How much of a jump do you want to expect from him and hope to see?
If he averages 80, 90, 100 rushing yards a game, I think that's what you want to expect out of him, because that was the pace he was on last year before he suffered the elbow injury right before the Syracuse game. He was on a good pace where, he was churning out some yards, and, Malik could get his yards too, but Mack was doing, work, he was being a workhorse back there. And, that's kind of what I want to see out of him again. He has really toned down his body this year. He's in much better shape. The fat's been replaced with some muscle. He's still around the same weight he was last year, but he just looks leaner and, stronger. And I think that was another reason why he decided to come back, because he wanted another year, working out with Dominique Stadinsky, working, in the training table and getting, the right foods in him. So, I'm hopefully, between 80 to 100 yards a game would be ideal for him. And then you mix in Green and Lewis, getting you on average about 60 yards a game. And I think that would be a good combination for Liberty.
You talked about the other running backs. Obviously, they've used the transfer market, and Peyton Rickett also as well, adding to that depth at running back. What do you see from the rest of the running backs able to supplement this team? You think they have a decent chance to have a role on this squad?
Yeah, since Liberty's got their Bruce Johnson, the running backs coach, has utilized the 3 running back rotation. In 2018, it was Frankie Hickson, Mack, and Peyton Pickett. Last year, it was Mack, Pickett, and Shader Lewis. This year, it's going to be Mack, Green, and Lewis. With Peyton Pickett opting to go to Jackson State and the transfer portal, and TJ Green, we know he's explosive. He's a 6'1", 210-pound running back. He's got a lot of speed. He can run between the tackles. And, that 3-headed rotation will be really good, because you wear people down with Mack and Green, then Shader Lewis has that burst, as we saw last year against Syracuse. Touchdown runs, 54, 72 yards. He's got the speed to get to the second level, plant his foot, and then take off. So that's something where, from the dynamic of this running back room, they have the potential to be very explosive. And, if Hugh Freeze wants to go to a complementary style offense again, where they do ball control and try to keep the defense off the field, those are 3 good guys to have back there who, will be able to pick up 4 or 5, 6 yards to carry, and you'll be able to, move the chains every 2 to 3 plays.
I got my transfers mixed up, but thank you for correcting me there with Pickett. The transfer mark, he went to Utah, he transferred to Liberty, and then he transferred out. There's so many transfers, you get the guys mixed up at some points. Yeah. So moving on, speaking of, a great group of pass catchers coming back, 8 of the 9, you mentioned CJ Yarborough not coming back. How important is this for this group to step up? Obviously, you had 2 super seniors in Shads and Shan. I think I pronounced that right. And then obviously the redshirt freshman in Douglas are just 3 names to look for. They have some good tight ends that can block on the edge to help the offensive line. What are your expectations for this pass catching group?
Yeah, it all starts with the slot receivers with DJ Stubbs and Demario Douglas. I mean, those guys combined for 70 catches last year, led the team in that category. And, they're small slot receivers, but boy, they're shifty. They're really elusive, and they make the first guy miss. And I think that's the key thing in this offense, make that first guy miss. And that's what Stubbs has excelled at for 4 years. And that's what we saw Douglas really do a lot last year in his first extended playing time. And I think for those guys, if they can be that safety valve over the middle and then be utilized on the outside. Against some of these cornerbacks that don't have the speed to keep up with them, that's a way to utilize them. But I think this year is going to be a big year for Noah Frith. Injuries have really hurt him his first 2 years. Foot surgery before the 2019 opener really, limited what he could do. Last year, he had a nagging hamstring injury before the season, didn't play a lot. I think, his 6'4" frame, he gives a lot of defenses fits with his frame, his size, his speed, his strength, and his quality hands. And I think he's a guy that can really step up this year and, not be a guy who catches 15, 20 passes, but be a guy who catches 50 to 60 passes. And really that will open up things for Stubbs and Douglas, there at the slot. You get Kevin Shaw on the outside, who's arguably one of the fastest players on this team and plays small as an outside receiver, but you get him to go over the top, on the outside and get behind a cornerback. Boom, that's 6 points on the board right there. So, they have those, and I'm really excited to see what Stetson Moore can do, the transfer from Pearl River Community College. They wanted to use him at tight end, like an Evan Ingram type, like they used at Ole Miss, but they just like his 6'4", 237-pound frame out on the outside. And he's got the size and the physicality where he can win a lot of one-on-one matchups, and he's not afraid to go over the middle. So it'll be interesting to see how they use him this year. Might limit his packages and what they do and try to, really work with him. So that way next year will be his time to shine.
That's a good way to sum up the offense. I think this is a very good offense, and could be one of the best in the country. And Hugh Freeze has done it again. Obviously, the wizard he was at Ole Miss, moving now obviously to Liberty, and their offense and their defense, they played very good complementary football last season, and they're going to look to do it again this year. And I think, when you play complementary football, especially on the college level, it leads to success. And especially when you have the, you're going to go with a Heisman caliber quarterback. You have the 11th overall defense, 16th in scoring defense last year. And they played really good offenses despite, how weird that schedule was in a Coastal Carolina. Virginia Tech had its moments, especially on the run, and they were able to stifle it a little bit in that game. NC State has a really good quarterback, and I believe he was playing in that game, but from recollection serves me. By that time, obviously they lost, but they still played a really close game. And then obviously, the bowl game with Coastal, as I mentioned, probably was a really good defensive performance given how explosive Coastal was all year. Obviously, starting at the front, no, I like their offense. Their front is really good, returning a lot. Starting at the ends with Darrell Johnson and Trayshawn Clark, 14 sacks, 21 and a half tackles for loss. That is a really good tandem to have on the outside. Athletic guys that are quick and can get to the quarterback and into the backfield.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. They're spoiled on defensive end. You look past Darrell Johnson and Trayshawn Clark, Steven Sings, who was the Virginia Tech pledge, who flipped to Liberty, Akeel Washington, and then we'd be remiss to mention Christian Zachary, the first ESPN top 300 prospect to go to Liberty. They have embarrassment of riches at the ends. Darrell Johnson is a freak. If you know his story, he was originally a safety. He started at safety in college, bulked up, moved to linebacker, and then Liberty was like, okay, this guy can come off the edge and play that bandit position where he can drop out into coverage and make some plays. And, last year, he was a menace off the edge. He got some interceptions, playing in that boundary slot when he dropped in the coverage. He's a guy who, NFL scouts are really drooling over because of his potential. But I think Trayshawn Clark's the key to this defensive line. He is arguably the most important piece just based on his size and what he can do against the run and against the pass. And he graded out the best of all the defensive linemen for Liberty in most all the games last year, especially in the Cure Bowl, where he had like a 91.7 rating there off the edge, 10 quarterback pressures. He's a guy where in pass rush situations, they slot him over to tackle, and he had more than half of his sacks last year as a defensive tackle, which shows not only is he fast off the edge, but he has the strength to win battles against these guards and these centers. And that's something, that type of versatility you don't see a lot very often. And, what Liberty's able to do with him is key. And then you go inside with Elijah James, Ralph Sarusins, and Henry Chibuzi. Those three guys are going to rotate a lot, and they're very good and very solid. James and Rusins are both super seniors. James really needed the 2019 season to redshirt because he was playing at 260 pounds as a defensive tackle, and that's way undersized for what they needed. So he's had, 2 cycles with, the strength and conditioning staff and, the nutrition staff, and he's been able to bulk up to about 305. And you can tell how much better he plays at that weight. Rusins, we know his story coming from Latvia, didn't play much football at all prior to college. So every year he gets at Liberty is only going to help his draft stock. And Chibuzi was the former 3-star offensive lineman who, played 1 game at offensive line in 2018, played 3 games on defense in 2019, and really came into his own last year. And I'm expecting him to make another push. And then, Chris Body, Kidney Charles, a freshman and a redshirt freshman, respectively. Those guys are going to be monsters inside, and they're going to get a chance to play this year. And Charles is going to get a chance to play more this year, but Body's been coming along really well. I think he's got a chance to really help this defensive line. And when you look at the fact that they're going to play 10 to 11 guys on defensive line every week, they're going to rotate guys in, keep those guys fresh because, they want to get to 3rd and long situations, bring in that pass rush, and really create some havoc for the quarterback.
How big of a loss is Anthony Butler?
Big. He played 95% of snaps of the games he played last year. I mean, they just couldn't take him off the field just because of his experience and the fact that they weren't really deep at linebacker. But, through the transfer portal, they've added Louisiana Monroe transfer Rashad Harding. He's going to step right in and play that Mike linebacker position. And then you look at the fact that Ahmad Walker, the 3-star prospect from Georgia, he's going to be coming in and he's going to be playing some extended snaps. He's been getting a lot of 1st and 2nd string looks in camp, and he got a lot of 1st string looks in the spring because Harding was dealing with an injury. So Ahmad Walker's really come along and he could play quite a bit. Then you look over there at Will, Aaron Pierre, Tyron Dupree, and then Prairie View A&M transfer Story Jackson, who had 50 tackles in 3 games in the spring season. He's coming along quite well, and he could be a guy that gets 2nd string reps, maybe even start there. But, they got 5 to 6 linebackers now that have, some experience minus Walker and that they can play. So I think they're deeper now at linebacker. So Butler's loss shouldn't hurt as much. And, the fact that Butler played so much, they really couldn't take him off the field. Now they feel like they have the depth where they can bring that starter off the field and not have any drop off.
What do you want to see from the DB spot? Obviously, you return all 5 starters again. I feel like I'm repeating myself. But this secondary, I don't want to say was the weakness of the defense last year, but didn't, I would say out of the group, maybe was overall on a solid defense. What do you want to see from an improvement from them as all of them are coming back to this team?
Yeah, I mean, they had the 12th ranked passing defense last year, so I don't know if that's really a weakness when you consider the fact that the run defense was so good too. I think you want to see more production out of there, and they didn't have a lot of interceptions from that group. I think Chris Megginson did a really good job of shutting people down on the field side, and I think that's where he's going to be this year. The big key is going to be the fact that you're going to have 2 new starters on defense this year. Replacing 2 starters from last year. Deron Lowe is going to be starting over at boundary corner. He's the transfer from UTEP who has had 4 interceptions in 2 years there with the Miners. And he had the Miners only 2 interceptions last year. And the Miners had the worst passing defense in terms of interceptions on pass attempts last year. I think they only had 2 interceptions and 227 pass attempts, which was, that's just awful. But the fact that you get Lowe, you have Megginson, you can rotate in Marcus Haskins. That's a good cornerback rotation there. And then you look at safeties, Javon Scruggs, who led the team in tackles and had 2 interceptions last year, is back at Rover. The big key is going to be over that strong safety nickel back outside linebacker position with Skylar Thomas, the Washington State transfer. He's going to start over Juwan Treadwell at that position. He is the fastest player on offense. He was clocked at going close to 28.5 miles per hour in a drill over the summer and what they timed him. He's fast, and he's got a chance to really make a difference because of his ability to to play around the line of scrimmage, make a lot of plays there, and also drop into coverage and play some zone. Because, this defense is very similar to the one he ran at Washington State, and he's got a chance to really make some plays. And one of his roommates is free safety Cedric Stone, who transferred to Washington State prior to last season, actually played a good bit, and is going to be starting at free safety this year. He's a guy that's got a lot of ball skills as well. So I think that defense, through the addition of Lowe and Thomas, and then the return of Scruggs, Megidson, and Stone, they're good. This group has improved through addition, and they didn't lose anyone of note. So I think that's a big thing for them moving forward, is that they got faster and they also brought back some wealth of experience. And I think that's going to really help them, especially when you get later in the season and you're playing the Ole Misses of the world, you're playing the Louisianas of the world, and then when you're playing Army, when those defensive backs are going to be vital to stopping that triple option.
And obviously now moving on to special teams, as we are here in a special edition of the Fast Lane with Damien Sordelett of the News Advance, talking Liberty Flames previewing their season. How much more confident can Hugh Freeze be in his kicking game now that he's seen Alex Barbier, I think I pronounced that right again, make so many clutch kicks? Obviously the one against Virginia Tech, which was phenomenal. And then, he had a really good game in the Cure Bowl to end the year.
Yeah. The one big thing with Barbier is the fact that he's going to have some consistency this year. If you look at, 20 or 30 and closer and then 50 plus, he was perfect. It was in between where he struggled. And I think this year, the fact that he had the entire spring to work with Austin Mock, the snapper, Aiden Alves, the holder, and then this entire preseason camp of working with them is going to help. That should help with consistency and being able to connect on kicks on a more frequent basis, because they need to score points every time they touch the ball. Ideally, you want to get in the end zone and put up 6 and have Barbier come in and chip in the extra point. But, there are going to be times where you need field goals. And, for his heroics last year, beating Virginia Tech, the 44-yarder in overtime that proved to be the winning points against Coastal, Liberty was, a point away from beating NC State, and then Barbier had his field goal blocked, which, ended the Flames' run of trying to be perfect. So that's, key is, just getting that consistency down and, hoping, the fact that they have much more seasoned blockers up front now, you'll prevent the chances of kicks getting blocked, and, him getting the confidence to, make those mid-range field goals on a consistent basis.
He thought the coach called timeout. That's all it was. Moving on. All right. So the Vegas total is 9 for the Liberty Flames. I think a big part of this, if you look at their schedule, obviously, Syracuse, University of Louisiana Monroe has always been solid. North Texas, they're up and down. Ole Miss, they end the year pretty much with one of the hardest schedules in the country, if you really think about it, especially if these teams meet up. You have Ole Miss, which is going to be a really good offense. We'll see with their defense. That's a big question mark. UNL Monroe was a team that last year, people forget, took Coastal to the wire, was supposed to play them again in the Sun Belt title game and beat Iowa State, who is, some people think, myself included, could make the college football playoff and at least win the Big 12 this year. And then Army is always a tough test in the triple option. And this is a very interesting schedule. UAB is a tough test as well. Conference USA, champion, that is UAB. This is a really good schedule. And for 9 wins, what do you see from this schedule? Do you think they can hit the 9-win mark, become a 10-win team? It's difficult, but it's doable.
Yeah, I think, the ceiling is definitely 9 to 10 wins. I think realistically 8 wins, because, Syracuse is going to be a Friday night game. And if the Carrier Dome is full, that will have a big impact, because last year Liberty wasn't playing in a stadium with fans in the Carrier Dome. So you didn't have that, noise factor that a lot of teams have had. And I have a feeling, if the fans are, from what I read from message boards, are not fans of Liberty, they will probably want to show up and make as much noise as they can, because, they don't want them to win. And, I liken it to the old Big East days when, Virginia Tech, Syracuse were the cream of the crop. Miami was up there too. And, the Carrier Dome was, raucous for a lot of those games. That's going to be a good test. And the following week against UAB, it will be the first game for Protective Stadium They're in Birmingham. So you have a feeling UAB will be the first home game of the year. They're going to be fired up and ready to go. You know, after that, the schedule gets a little lighter. Louisiana Monroe, first year under Terry Bowden, they were just awful last year. I mean, one of the worst teams in the nation in every category. You know, you hope you can go there and win. North Texas has been struggling. You know, Austin A at quarterback. You hope he can have a better year than he had last year, and if he does, it's going to be his. You know, the skill position players are going to have to step up for him. And the defense was not very good last year, and you hope they can take a step forward. And you know, if you can get through that stretch and get to Ole Miss week 10, haven't had a bye yet. If you can get to week 10 against Ole Miss, one loss, maybe none. If you can get some breaks on the road, you know, they're setting up themselves up for a really good season. And, you know, if they get to week 10, 9 wins, they've already surpassed what I think they can do. But, you know, realistically, 8 to 10 wins is doable. You know, they've got to have their breaks along the way, and then finishing the season back-to-back home games against Louisiana Lafayette, which, as you mentioned, you know, gave Coastal a great game last year. And, you know, Louisiana Lafayette doesn't have to play Coastal this year in the regular season until, you know, hopefully they play them in the Sun Belt title game. And then Army is going to be a really good test. So, like you said, the last 3 games are brutal. Luckily for Liberty, 2 of them are at home. But, you know, I think between 8 to 10 wins is very doable. I know a lot of fans, and I've read the message boards, think Liberty could be undefeated after Ole Miss and go into those last 2 games with a chance to run the table. But, you know, they're games along the way. I think UAB is going to be one of the toughest tests early in the season. And then, of course, Ole Miss. And then, you know, that's where I think the 4 losses could be UAB, Ole Miss, one of the final 2, if not both of them, because both are really hard opponents to play, especially with Levi Lewis coming back for Louisiana, and Army will have a full year to, you know, get 4 new starters on the offensive line figured out and get, you know, the entire running back core and quarterback ready. So it's going to be a tough closing task for Liberty, but if they do really well around the year, that could set them up for, you know, getting to the 9 or 10 win mark and, you know, hopefully a really favorable bowl game again.
Well, Dan, one more question for you. To me, this is the most highest expectations Liberty's ever had in their history of the program coming into a season, at least from a fan base. You talked about them being undefeated heading into Ole Miss, which I think I agree with you. I do not see happening just because, you know, you could really break their season into 4 parts, and I think that Syracuse UAB kind of hurdle, it's a big one. Can I see them doing it? Yes, likely, probably not. But how is this team what is your sense of this team and the weight of expectations on them? How are they reacting to it as they head into, you know, luckily a pretty, let's just call it frankly, a warm-up game against Campbell next weekend?
Yeah, they've chosen to say the right things so far. They're not saying anything about those preseason polls. They're saying, you know, they're not even paying attention to it. And Hugh Freeze has told them, hey, don't listen to the outside noise. Focus on chasing a standard. Because right now, if they choose to chase success and try to get to 10 wins last year, they're going to fall flat on their face. That's a fact. They've got to chase a standard of being as good as they were, being better than they were the day before. And that's what really set last year's team apart, because they chased a standard of being better than they were the day before. And, you know, with so many guys coming back, I have a feeling they will still keep that same mentality. And, you know, honestly, they ought to come in, blow out Campbell, you know, make a statement early on, you know, get everything in groove, start feeling good. And, you know, head into the rest of the season, you know, with some momentum. And I have a feeling, you know, if they choose not to let the outside world dictate how they play, you know, they have a chance for another special season. And that's the thing that's been reiterated time and time again by these assistant coaches, by these players. They know they have the pieces in place for a special season. They just have to make sure they put forth the same type of effort and raise the bar from last year based on the fact they have so many returners coming back.
Well, Damien, thank you so much for joining me this weeknight, I guess, as we record this on a night. I appreciate you taking some time out. How can Fastlane listeners get some more content from you, obviously with News Advance?
Yeah, definitely. You can read all my work at newsadvance.com. And then you can follow me on Twitter at Damien Sordelett. I post all my links to everything on there. And of course, you can follow us at
Well, Well, it looks like we lost Damien right at the end. Like you said, follow him at Damien Sordelett on Twitter. Get as much of the great content that Dame has. Thanks so much again to Dame, and thank you so much for listening for this Liberty Flames season preview, special edition of the Fast Lane. I'm Trey Lyles signing off. We'll have later on, again, like I mentioned, we've had one from Damon Dillman, CavsCorner.com, talking Who's, as well as David Cunningham, or as the nickname I gave him while we were in school together, Youngblood DC, TechSideline.com, previewing the Hokies. Thank you so much for listening to this special edition of the Fast Lane.